Welcome back to Cactus Wrestling, and make sure you hit that like button and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on future Cactus updates. So I threw out this kind of premise for a video to our group chat, and I'm interested to open the floor a little bit. I was basically saying I think there are too many Division I wrestling programs, and my rationale behind this statement is merely purely based on the disparity between the level of competition between the higher Division I wrestling programs and the bottom. And I'm all for growing wrestling as a sport. I want to see programs grow and add wrestling, but do they need to be at the Division One level? Like, for example, Bellarmine is a new program that is recently Division One. They went through the process, I don't know what they started at, Division Three, down to Division Two, down to Division One. That's how the NCAA or NCAA process works. But adding Bellarmine to Division One means that they are on the schedule for other Division One wrestling teams, and they are going to have a harder time recruiting because the process is you can't compete in the postseason for several years. So some of these guys that are being recruited, they don't even get a chance to compete in the postseason, which is the most important part of wrestling. I just don't see how, smaller time programs like this being at D1 level helps wrestling.
I'm actually on the same page with Jack about this. Is that we looked into it. There's about I think 81 Division One programs. I think we said there's about 66 Division Two and around 83 Division Three. And my numbers might be off, but I also don't know what makes a program Division One versus Division Two versus Division Three. What that entails to things like funding, additional scholarships, why they can move up and or down. Like we talked about, Bellarmine, why not stay at Division Two? What is the appeal to go to Division One? Do they get additional funding for the school? Um, you know, but I do know that there's a lot of really good D3 programs. I think like Augustburg and Wartburg. They could probably knock off, like, I would say at least, a program like, Bucknell, Buffalo, Kent State, Sacred Heart, LIU. I mean, possibly, George Mason, maybe even like a Central Michigan. Why? What is the benefit of them staying D3 where they're consistently winning Division Three national championships year after year after year? And I mean, Notre Dame, Division Two program. I know that they were for years the top Division Two program in the nation. Why not move up to Division One? What is the appeal to stay there? I guess like there's a lot that I don't fully understand with this about why programs are where they are. But to Jack's point, a lot of these teams that are Division One would probably benefit from moving down a division. I know my younger brother's team, their first year as a program ever, first year ever as a program, they went Division Three and they beat a Division One team in a duel and that same Division One team in a tournament setting. Team that had been around for years and years and years as a Division One team. Um, what message does that send to Division One wrestlers, Division Three wrestlers? Why would that Division One team that lost not just move down? If they have such a struggling team in the first place, they're probably not going to get these top Division One recruits anyway. So the scholarship issue is kind of a moot point.
Yeah, and we know, we kind of pick on Sacred Heart being a Connecticut-based school, the only D1 Connecticut-based school, but they only have one scholarship. And you have a coach like John Clark, who's a national champion.
Yeah.
He knows a thing or two about wrestling. You
Oh,
can't
yeah.
place the blame entirely on John Clark. How are you recruiting? How can you grow a program when you only have one scholarship? And nowadays, loyalty is harder to come by for a lot of athletes who want to just transfer to the higher name programs because they want the best success. And I don't blame them. I don't blame them for wanting to transfer out and going to like the Big Ten schools, but it just makes it that much harder for these smaller programs to get anywhere. And now that we see more and more Division One teams getting added, I just foresee all these, a lot of SoCon teams are like this, where, maybe they're not fully funded. And I know very surface level, the difference between D3, D2, and D1 is what they can offer from a scholarship capacity. D3, there's no athletic scholarships. D2, you can do partial, and D1, you can. But if you're a team that can only offer one scholarship, how can you compete? Like I almost wish it was like the collegiate postseason was structured where all three divisions compete interchangeably, and maybe you have a D3 team that gets to compete in the D1 nationals. I knew they used to do that.
They did, yeah, they did used to do that because there was, guys that were, I think there was a man that was a six-time national champion. He was a three-time or four-time in Division 3 and also like two-time in Division 1. Um, you know, they allowed him to double dip in the same year. Um, I think that'd be awesome to bring something like that back. But like you said, not to pick on Sacred Heart, they have a huge roster, and obviously they're trying to be as talented as possible. But why would someone go to there over a better D1 school?
I feel like if there was a condensed number of D1 programs, there would be less disparity amongst the quality of competition, and you'd
Yeah.
see more exciting dual meets. You'd see more team races at the NCAA tournament, and I think that could be a better driver to growing the sport from a fan base
Mhm.
rather than we're going to grow all these programs, but most of these programs can't compete. And why does anyone want to watch? You know, I wouldn't be surprised if Penn State's backups could beat a lot of these rosters.
I mean, they have. I mean, we saw even at the top level, we saw Anthony Kosar. He was a backup at the time, knocked off Colin Moore. I think Jack brings up a great point. Like so many of these guys are sitting behind good guys because they'd rather be on those top tier teams than say, potentially be a starter on a small program that doesn't have a schedule that allows them to be this great wrestler.
And we're kind of equating it as a like in my mind, I see it as like, Major League Baseball, there's 30 teams, NFL, there's 32 teams. There's not 90 teams. And wrestling, there's 80 teams. Like if wrestling was condensed down to 30 teams, I think it's a lot more competitive in terms of the number of programs, and maybe there is a better way to kind of structure that in the wrestling postseason where you only have the top 30 can compete or something. I don't know how that would exactly work.
I think we talked about this too. We talked about like how many teams are in like college football. There's around like almost 250 Division 1 teams in college football between FCS and FBS. But what makes that a little different, at least in my mind, is that you have 11 starters on offense, 11 on defense, and 11 on special teams, potentially more depending on if you're on different special team units. Additionally, there is a professional league that college is supposed to filter into for the college football goes to the NFL. Um, College baseball goes to the MLB. College hockey goes to NHL. NBA basketball. Wrestling doesn't have that, so having like all these teams doesn't really benefit them, to get them to the next level. I think that if you had, like Jack said, less number of teams, it would force guys to have more competitive duels, and kind of rise to the top. Or a guy that's, maybe at a smaller D1 school that just really likes to wrestle and wants a competitive wrestling can go to a more aggressive D3 school. Um,
Yeah, and I think just to be clear, I'm not against teams adding wrestling to their
yeah,
programs. I just think it's like the level of competition, like the best competition should wrestle the best competition. Like having Sacred Heart, not to knock on Sacred Heart, but having Sacred Heart on Penn State's schedule, that doesn't really help the Penn State wrestlers. And it
I
doesn't
really
really
don't.
help the Sacred Heart wrestlers either.
Yeah. I think that from a coach's perspective, especially if you have, I mean, this is more for off season for younger guys, is you want quality matches. If I'm a brand new wrestler, I just finished my first year as a JV wrestler, and I went 0-20. My coach would not be wise to be like, okay, sweet, go to Super 32 this off season. It wouldn't benefit me. I'd go, potentially get pinned super quickly by two guys that are nationally ranked, and then be like, wow, what a waste of my time. I would want to wrestle quality matches that I'm competitive with to help build me up. And as I get better, I would want to try tougher competition. Um, I think that to Jack's point, a really talented team wrestling a team that's below their skill level, or vice versa, a team that is trying to get better, taking on the best team in the nation doesn't benefit either of them.
It's kind of like I don't know too much about soccer, but it feels very similar to like the Premier League. Like teams can get derelegated and drop down a division. I feel like if wrestling had something like that, where you have
Certain
maybe
standards.
maybe a lower tier D1 team, like maybe they have to drop down because they didn't qualify anyone for nationals or something. Maybe there's some parameter in place that says, all right, you have to have X amount of winning record against X amount of teams. You have to have X amount of NCAA qualifiers, or else your scheduling has to go against D3 programs. And then vice versa, if a D3 program performs well, maybe they can bump up into the Division 1 league.
Yeah, but I think that we agree, like we want to see wrestling continue to grow. But just like in football, you wouldn't see like UConn football play Alabama. It wouldn't make sense. And wrestling does those matchups a lot for whatever reason. So maybe the reason is we have, like Jack said, we should have programs moving up and down. I think it would give guys a lot more competitive purpose and say like, the season matters.
Thanks for watching. We are Cactus Wrestling, and we'll see you next time on our next video.